Hello my loves, my name is Hannah and welcome to a new reading vlog. It is the 1st of May as I sit down to film this, which means it is time for me to pull 4 books off of my shelf that I am excited to read this month. This is part of my Reading Impatiently vlog series where I do exactly that at the start of every month. Well, except April, but we're not talking about April. And if you want to know why we're not talking about April, you can go and see my welcome back video, which explains where I was in April. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading some great books this month. I think I've picked 4 books that I'm really going to like, which is nice, isn't it? And May is also my birthday month. It's my birthday at the end of this month. So I thought I would treat myself to some books that I've really been wanting to get to recently. 3 of these are books that were on my shelf and 1 is one that I've got out of the library. So I'm just very quickly going to let you know what we're reading. I'm not going to go into too much detail on what these books are about, but I might briefly explain why I've picked them, and then we'll crack on. So the first book is Companion Piece by Ali Smith. This is the sort of final book that she wrote to wrap up the seasonal quartet, which I loved reading over the last year or so. I vlogged my reading of each of those seasonal books and I read them in the seasons that they were, so starting with autumn and ending with summer. And I've been saving this one for a rainy day because I love Ali Smith. So this one we're going to be getting to really soon. Then I picked up some non-fiction, or at least some, I think it is mostly non-fiction, and that is Letter to My Daughter by Angelou. So I'm having to hold you here because I've got some kind of it's just blurring over there, so I'm filming on a phone that I'm not quite used to filming on yet, so I'm holding them in front of my face, and if you want to know why, that's why. So this is a series of writing reflections that Maya Angelou wrote to a daughter that she never had, and from what I can tell, it's sort of a sort of reflection on how to live well, I think. And I just thought, I love Maya Angelou's poetry. I've actually never read her prose in full before, so I'm looking forward to getting to that. And I thought this might be a nice thing to read sort of in the run-up to entering my 35th year on this planet. So yeah, that one. And then sticking with kind of classic authors, last year or the year before I read The Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers, which was the first book by her that I've ever read, and I loved it and have been sort of picking up a few other titles by her over the last couple of years when I've seen them secondhand, but I haven't read any of them yet. Classic. So I'm going to read The Member of the Wedding by Carson McCullers, which as far as I can tell is about this tomboy who's like, someone in their family is getting married and they become very obsessed with being part of the wedding. I love Carson McCullers' writing, and oh my god, I've just seen that this has an introduction by Ali Smith. So perfect. Yeah, I really liked the prose style, her prose style before, kind of like sparse, but yeah, I loved that. So really looking forward to getting to this. And then the final book is the one that I got from the library, and this is Boulder by Baltasar, which is translated from the Catalan, I think, by Julia Sanches. This is a really short little novella. It was shortlisted for the International Booker last year or a year before last year. And it's funny that Ali Smith mentioned Carson McCullers. No, it's funny that Ali Smith introed this book, because I just saw, as I was checking some of the details, that the epigraph of this book is a quote from Carson McCullers. So I've clearly just picked a very in sync pile of books. So they're the 4 that I'm going to read. I don't know which one I'm going to pick up first. I probably won't start any of them like today because I'm actually in the middle of 2 other books at the moment. But I like to record these little intros on the 1st of the month, just to really set the scene for myself, really, rather than you. But yeah, so those are the books, and let's get reading. Read 2 books. It's my lunch break currently, so I'm going to try really hard not to talk for ages, but one of these books I feel like I could talk about ad nauseum, so we'll see how we go. The first one I'm going to talk about is Letter to My Daughter by Maya Angelou, and as I said at the start, this is a collection of writings that Maya Angelou has pulled together and collected, that are addressed, written to a imagined daughter, but really it's less specific than I originally thought. And there's like a little bit at the start that I think I'll just read you, and I think it will give you a good idea of what the book is about. So it starts. Dear daughter, this letter has taken an extraordinary time getting itself together. I have all along known that I wanted to tell you directly of some lessons I have learned and under what conditions I learned them. My life has been long, and believing that life loves the liver of it, I have dared to try many things, sometimes trembling but daring still. I have only included here events and lessons which I have found useful. I have not told how I have used the solutions, knowing that you are intelligent and creative and resourceful, and you will use them as you see fit. You will find in this book accounts of growing up, unexpected emergencies, a few poems, some light stories to make you laugh, and some to make you meditate. There have been people in my life who meant me well, taught me valuable lessons, and others who have meant me ill and have given me ample notification that my world is not meant to be all peaches and cream. I have made many mistakes, and no doubt will make many more before I die. When I have seen pain, when I have found that my ineptness has caused displeasure, I have learned to accept my responsibility and to forgive myself first, then to apologise to anyone injured by my misreckoning. Since I cannot unlive history and repentance is all I can offer God, I have hopes that my sincerest apologies were accepted. You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. Try to be a rainbow in someone's cloud. Do not complain. Make every effort to change things you do not like. If you cannot make a change, change the way you have been thinking. You might find a solution. Never whine. Whining lets a brute know that a victim is in the neighbourhood. Be certain that you do not die without having done something wonderful for humanity. I gave birth to one child, a son, but I have thousands of daughters. You are black and white, Jewish and Muslim, Asian, Spanish-speaking, Native American and Alouette. You are fat and thin and pretty and plain, gay and straight, educated and unlettered, and I am speaking to you all. Here is my offering to you. And so what follows are exactly what she outlines, these really quite short, sort of between 2 and 6 page reflections, and some of them are quite funny, almost, where she's poking fun at herself for things she's done in the past. Normally coming from a place of she has assumed the worst in someone and has then been quite rightly put in her place. But then there's also some really quite difficult and troubling things to read in here, particularly to do with violence against women. And it roughly has a sort of chronology or shape to it. It begins certainly with more sections that are to do with her becoming a mother and giving birth. She was a teenager when she gave birth to her son, and things from sort of earlier on in her life, and then we move into, broadly speaking, some more sort of professional concerns, and then as we come towards the end, you get a lot more poetry, but you also get a lot more politics, a lot around the importance of diverse voices in kind of art and poetic spaces. She reminded me of a Langston Hughes poem that I really liked. Is it called I Too Sing of America? That Langston Hughes poem. But yeah, she quotes that in here too. And there were a couple of things that I didn't like personally agree with, but on the whole, it was a really like enjoyable read, the sort of book that you can dip in and out of really easily. The ends of a lot of the sections almost read like little affirmations. Let me read you a couple. So, we may act sophisticated and worldly, but I believe we feel safest when we go inside ourselves and find home, a place where we belong, and maybe the only place we really do. And there was another one. Is it this one? Bear with. The ship of my life may or may not be sailing on calm and amiable seas. The challenging days of my existence may or may not be bright and promising. Stormy or sunny days, glorious or lonely nights, I maintain an attitude of gratitude. If I insist on being pessimistic, there is always tomorrow. Today, I am blessed. All great artists draw from the same resource, the human heart, which tells us all that we are more alike than we are unlike. So there's lots of like lovely things in it. I don't think it's going to be an absolute favourite. Towards the end, she, as well as talking kind of more overtly politically, she also is... she talks more about her faith, her Christian faith, and that's always an interesting one for me. I was raised Catholic and have a lot of low level religious trauma, and I am not a Christian, or I wouldn't really describe myself as having a faith. I used to say I was an atheist, but I'm becoming increasingly uncomfortable with that word too, and I sort of feel like maybe it's not something that even needs a word. But I certainly sort of, there was a lot in the way she spoke about being a Christian that resonated with me as more of a kind of humanist, and so that was interesting, because I think a lot of the times when we're talking about faith and religion and spirituality, it's all just sort of shades of the same language, isn't it? But yeah, so enjoyed it. Like, it's a lovely book to dip in and out of, and I would say like it's almost all of it is very sort of like affirming, but there are a couple of sections in here that are you should check content warnings for if you're someone who needs to do that, particularly for sexual violence. It was very difficult. Thing is, it's one of those books where I'm like, I feel like I don't have a huge amount to say about it, because it is largely like a collection of anecdotes from someone's life, and that's quite hard to like critique. But I do feel like there are lots and lots and lots of sections that I could just read out to you. So that's positive, right? That's good. Right, the next one I read The Member of the Wedding by Carson, McCullers, and I really liked this book. I actually finished it a couple of days ago, and it has grown on me and grown on me and grown on me, and I think there is so many depths that we could plumb in this book, but let me try and keep it reasonably brief and reasonably concise. So Carson McCullers is a writer who wrote in the mid-20th century, if you're not familiar with her work. I feel like she's an author she was American, and I feel like she's an absolute classic author in America. She published books sort of just after all the big John Steinbecks. They came out sort of like in the late 30s. She was publishing like mostly in the 40s and early 50s. So she's sort of just coming out of that like literary tradition. I feel like she's talked about a lot more, and I don't think she's an author that necessarily, like, I've heard a lot of like British or European people on the internet talking about, which is a shame because she's so good. So this book is, I think I said at the start, the second of Carson McCullers' books that I've read, and it really reminded me a lot of the first of hers that I read, which is The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, and it had a lot of the same elements that I really liked. She writes places, these sort of like anonymous towns in the sort of south of America. She writes them so beautifully and sensitively, and she's got a wonderful way of writing like young characters, particularly young girls, that I think is a real gift. So the book, we're going to talk about what the book is on its surface, and what I think some people talk about the book mostly being, which is, it is a coming of age story. We are following a young girl called Frankie. She's 12 years old, and it's told over, broadly speaking, a 3-day period in Frankie's life. So and it follows, there's 3 sections that follow like roughly the 3 days. It's not a perfect matchup, but roughly the 3 days. In the first section, it's the aftermath of her brother has just come home from being posted, a military posting in Alaska, and he is getting married that weekend. So he's introduced his dad and Frankie to his girlfriend, his fiance, and they're getting married the following day. And Frankie inserts herself, in her own mind, inserts herself into this wedding. She is desperate to be a member of the wedding. She basically sort of falls in love with her brother and his fiance. She's in love with them as a couple. She's in love with them, the idea of this wedding, and she convinces herself that she is going to be a significant part of this wedding, and actually a significant part of the marriage. And what's so clever about it is that we, the reader, don't experience that interaction. So that has already happened. The introduction has already happened prior to the book kicking off. So we're really sort of like dropped right in the midst of this, and so we're trying to play catch up with Frankie quite a lot of the time, which is a really clever way of doing it. And then so the second part then is the day before the wedding. So the following day after the first section, it's the day of the wedding, because, you know, this was a different time. It was like, we're coming home, we're getting married. Oh, the wedding is tomorrow. Now we're getting married. And then the third section is the day of the wedding and the immediate aftermath after the wedding, which obviously I'm not going to spoil. So lots of people talk about it being a coming of age book, and being about adolescence and girlhood and trying to find your place. And it absolutely is those things. But I also feel like it's doing so much more than that. There is a lot in this book about Frankie trying to understand her identity, trying to work out who she is, and she's like trying on these different versions of herself. So in each section of the book, she changes her name. So she starts as Frankie, and then in the second part, she's changed her name to F. Jasmine, because her brother is called Jarvis and his girlfriend is called Jane. And she thinks, wouldn't it be nice if my name matched theirs? So maybe I'll be F. Jasmine. And so she's F. Jasmine and refers to herself as F. Jasmine throughout the whole of the second section. And then in the third section, she reverts to Frances, which I assume is her sort of given name. And that's interesting, kind of, and a little bit, I guess, kind of semi-autobiographical, because Carson McCullers was born Lula Carson McCullers, and at the age of 13 dropped the Lula to go for the more sort of gender-neutral Carson McCullers. When I first heard Carson McCullers, I assumed that she was a man. And yeah, so there's stuff in there around literally like how she is trying to find this identity. She's very concerned with wanting to be seen and witnessed, and she can't get this balance right between wanting to feel a part of something but also wanting to be above things and outside of things. And she spends a big chunk of the book the day before the wedding just like going around the town and telling absolutely everyone that she's going to be in the wedding, that she's going to go away on the honeymoon with her brother and the fiance, and that she's never going to return to town. And she goes and she tells absolutely everyone that she encounters that this is going to be true, like she's trying to convince herself of it. And actually the book even begins, the like opening few lines say, "It happened that green and crazy summer when Frankie was 12 years old. This was the summer when for a long time she had not been a member. She belonged to no club and was a member of nothing in the world. Frankie had become an unjoined person who hung around in doorways, and she was afraid." So there's a real existential sort of thing going on. She also talks about how she thinks about the world as being like that too. Yeah, so it was the year when Frankie thought about the world, and she did not see it as a round school globe with the countries neat and different coloured. She thought of the world as huge and cracked and loose and turning 1,000 miles an hour. And then it's also, and this is the thing that I think Ali Smith actually talks about this in her introduction, and I thought that because I'd read a little bit about what this book was about, or at least I'd heard it called like a great coming of age book. But there is so much, the war is looming so large in this book. And she talks just after that bit with the globe, or not a globe, as the case may be. She's talking about it not, that the maps she's got in school are already out of date because all the borders of the countries have been redrawn, even in like the time that she's been alive. And so there's this threat of the war happening, and she is wanting to insert herself into lots of different situations, and she can't seem to find peace anywhere. There's this really sweet bit where she's convinced herself, she's got this like daydream that she's going to give blood in the army. She's got this idea that she's going to give so much blood to the Red Cross that like all of the soldiers who go and fight in the war are going to have a little piece of her, and she's going to be known as like the girl that keeps the army going with like all of this blood. She talks about like wanting to give like a quart of her blood to the Red Cross every week, which is obviously impossible. But she's 12, so she doesn't really understand that, and then gets really upset when the Red Cross won't take her blood and says that she's too young. But she just is desperate to sort of experience things beyond herself, and that also comes from sort of she has these encounters with people. I mean, you can take the wedding as one example of wanting to insert herself into that relationship. She meets a soldier in the town who thinks she's much older than she is, and she plays this sort of part of pretending like she's 16, 17, and because we've already established earlier in the book that she's very tall for her age and quite well developed. Is part of why she feels kind of like separate from the other girls her age. And she's sort of stuck. There's this lovely trio of characters at the kind of heart of the book. So while it's called The Member of the Wedding, and that is what Frankie is obsessed with, she is actually already part of this really lovely threesome, which is her, Frankie, 12 years old, her cousin, John Henry, who I think is about 6 or 7, and Bernice, who is a black woman who's their housekeeper, essentially, but who has, Frankie's mum died in childbirth, I think. So Frankie never knew her, and Bernice is very much a sort of like maternal figure in her life, and they actually have these lovely, really interesting interactions, and Frankie really is very much part of something, but it's almost like she can't see how she's connected to those people, and she's constantly reaching out for more. And I just feel like I could talk about it for ages. It was such a, like, it's both really delicate in some ways, but just incredibly brutal. It's got this, like, really dissatisfying ending that I think is absolutely on purpose, and actually echoes some kind of motifs that have been appearing throughout the book, of like stories that never get finished being told, and there's like a piano tuner tuning a piano up the street, and they're all getting really frustrated because he's playing like 7 notes out of an 8-note scale, and he's not playing the final note, and they're all going like, finish the thing. And it felt like a book that was covering so much ground. She also just last bit I will say is like the way she embeds politics into the book was so interesting, or the way the book is political is really interesting, because it's very concerned with avoiding repetitions of behavior, and it's almost like it is the wholeness and the completeness, for example, of Bernice's character is quite remarkable from a white writer for a book written at the time that it was written. And it's very much it's political in what it's including in the stories, and the voices that the book is choosing to listen to, and the voices that we don't hear from. We don't hear from the brother. We barely hear from the father. We don't really hear from many white men. We hear from these sort of voices at the edges, and you can kind of macro that up to, I think, a concern that Carson McCullers has in this book and in other books of hers that I've read, or the other book of hers that I've read, about these sort of towns in America, these small towns that contain the whole multitude of human experience, obviously, because everywhere does, but are just always seen a little bit as not quite worthy of attention. And I also just think she's a very evocative writer. The way she uses language is brilliant, I think, because it is a very simple story, and narratively there's not tons and tons that goes on, but the way she executes it, I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. I've been talking for a really long time, sorry. So that's been my reading so far, halfway through, going well. I have also just started companion piece last night, and I just love Ali Smith so much. I just love her so much. And having had like a little bit of a wobble in with some of the seasonal quartet, touch wood, I'm really enjoying companion piece so far. So right, I've wanged on enough. I'm gonna go eat my lunch. Jesus. Companion piece by Ali Smith. And as ever, if you've watched any of the vlogs that I did I've done 4 of them for each of the seasonal quartet, where I read these books. I have such a hard time talking about Ali Smith's books. They sound like, anytime I try and talk about them, it just sounds like, what's that? What's that? Because it really does feel sometimes like she's just picked a load of disparate things and she's just decided to like write them together. And that's this, it's not a criticism, I love the sort of disjointedness sometimes of her books, and the fact that parts of it feel so so very realistic, and parts of it are almost like a bit melodrama-y, and then parts of it are just a bit almost supernatural and weird. And I really do feel like this book was the most disparate in terms of a narrative of the 4 in the quartet, and in that way it is a really good companion piece to the quartet. How are we going to talk about this? So we have a central character who, do I even know her name? I actually don't know. But it's a woman who is an artist, and she is living on her own, and it is, as with all of the seasonal quartet, it's very much situated in the now of when Ali Smith was writing. So it's post-COVID, but COVID's still very much around, but you know, in that like period after the pandemic where we were pretending that it had finished and was all fine. So her dad is ill, not with COVID, but he is in, I was going to say prison, that's to do with a different book that I'm reading. He was in hospital, and the book starts weirdly. I'm trying to remember, obviously it's just the worst thing to do when you've got a memory as bad as mine. I'm trying to remember because she always puts something really odd in her books, something a little bit, is this really happening? And this book had a lot of that, I think, more so than the others. But it kind of started with that. So this woman from her past who she went to university with, hasn't spoken to in a number of years. Our protagonist is, I think, in her 50s, mid-50s. So her dad is really quite elderly. And this woman from university like rocks up. Maybe she's in her 40s. And calls her and is like, hi! And she's like, who is this? Like, barely remembers her. And she's like, well, a really weird thing happened to me. And I thought, you're the person, Sandy. Sand is the person that I need to talk to about this. And the woman's like, I cannot believe I have made enough of an impression on you on like the brief interaction that we had in university that you're now thinking, oh, I need to call you and tell you about this. And the woman basically is a curator for a museum, and she's gone abroad to mainland Europe somewhere to retrieve this box that is like an incredible like medieval like artifact, and it's allegedly, I haven't actually googled even yet if this was really a thing. I need to do that. It's called the Boothby box, or the Boothby box, but basically it's a really sophisticated lock mechanism for the era, and she's escorting it back to the UK for an exhibit, and she gets stopped at airport security on her way back into the UK because she's got dual nationality, and she accidentally gave them her not British passport instead of her British passport. And obviously, because we're living in the post-Brexit world, people are super suspicious of this, and they take her into some room. And while she's in a room, she hears a voice, and the voice says, curfew or curlew, you choose. And that's it. And so this woman is calling Sand because she's like, you were always like doing the wordplay at university. What do you think this means? And so the book starts from there. But rather than going forward, I mean, we do technically move forward in time as well as back in time, but it actually almost like the narrative sort of unspools from that. It's so hard to describe. I really enjoyed it. I did find it narratively, like I said, like more disjointed than previous books of hers. I absolutely loved some of the wordplay though. Like Ali Smith always has really interesting art references throughout, and a lot of like intertextuality. There was this like whole bit where Sand is trying to remember this woman from university, and the one interaction she remembers is basically where she came to her room, this woman who's called her up had come to her room, and once again was basically like asking for her help because she'd got herself in this massive panic because she was supposed to be doing a presentation on an E. Cummings poem and didn't understand the E. Cummings poem. So they have this whole conversation about like what the poem might mean. And I, like, as a former literature student, loved that. I thought it was really interesting. And she doesn't. So the book is like all of the quartet. It's split into 3 sections, and she's called them You Choose, Curlew, and Curfew. And she offers throughout the book so many potential answers or potential explanations of like what those things are, but she just refuses to like definitively explain herself. And we're not even like 100% sure if that is even what the words that this woman heard while she was like in a isolation cell or whatever at the border. And yeah, I think there was like, as there have been in all of the seasonal quartet, there is a lot of political dissatisfaction. In the book, an awful lot of exposing just the really callous way that humans can think about other humans, as well as sort of exploring family relationships and dynamics. And it's one of those, she's so hard to talk about. She's so hard to talk about. It's like, I don't know, I feel like her books aren't like reading books. They're like, I don't know, like fucking going on a hike. And like, you can fucking love the experience of going on a hike, and you'll come back and someone's like, what did you learn from that hike? And I'm like, I don't know. But like, what did the hike mean? I'm like, I don't know. The hike was just beautiful, man. I don't know what it meant. It was just beautiful. I mean, that's I'm being a bit facetious. I think in some parts I do know what she means, but in other senses, she really does leave you to it. I mean, there's so many. I wouldn't do this because I wouldn't want to ruin Ali Smith for myself, but I would be fascinated by reading, like, if anyone's done like really close reading analyses of her books, because I bet it's so ripe for being like academically ripped to shreds. Just like construction wise, I think that would be so interesting, but I also think it would ruin it. So I don't want to do that, but if someone else has done it, I might read it. Do you know what I mean? So I may come back and say more. I may come back and say more before the end of the video about this. They're just really like, I like to sit in an Ali book for a while, but I'm really glad I read it. she's very curious about the narratives that we come up with for our own lives, existence, experiences. And I'm always down to read that. So we continue to have a good time. Tomorrow evening, my friend Sarah's coming over, which, if you have been here for the last few weeks, you will know that if Sarah's coming over, that means we're making a cake. That means we're making a shop-bought cake mix cake with a can of pop poured into it. And the flavour of cake that we are doing tomorrow is a vanilla sponge mix, like a classic Victoria sponge mix, made with ginger beer and a bit of added extra ground ginger. I really wanted some crystallized ginger, but I couldn't find any in the shop. Anyway, that, and then I'm going to do a lime buttercream with some fresh raspberries in the middle. What do we think of that? I think that's going to be banging. What I'm going for is kind of like the flavours of a Moscow Mule. You with me? I think it's going to be delicious. Anyway, so I will do that tomorrow. I'm reading a few other bits and pieces at the minute because these all, I had intended. I did deliberately pick shorter books because I am still limping my way to the end of the Euros reading that I'm doing for this Euros challenge, which kicks off in a month today. And I still have 4 books to read for that. So I did deliberately pick shorter books, but I am rattling through them like quicker than I was expecting to. So I'm gonna give it a little bit of time before I pick up Boulder, the 4th and final one, because part of me thinks I could just like blast through that tonight. But I wanna stretch it out a bit. I like my impatient reading, and I am aware that this is not the point of impatient reading, but I do like to stretch it out a little bit so that like I've always kind of got a book on the go that is from my little stack of impatient books. You would have to live inside my brain to understand, and I do live there, and even I don't always understand. So let's make some cake. Oh, and we're also going to take Lewin for a walk at Plessy Woods, so there may also be some lovely woods B-roll, and then cake. Blinds down. The hair is short. Had my seasonal chop. We went for a walk at Plessy Woods. It was delightful. We made the cake. It was good. It was quite a lot to process. It was unusual in that normally when you have like a ginger cake, it's like a heavy, studgy cake, and excuse him. Don't point wagging your tail. The texture that you get when you make a cake with pop is like incredibly light. Like it's real light. Like a kind of almost like a chiffon cake. And so it was really weird to have like this pale, very light cake taste like ginger, and like just sensorily, it took me a while to wrap my little brain around it, but it is good cake. I do wonder if the ginger might be better in a more like heavily gingered cake. I put a bit of extra ground ginger in. But yeah, anyway, that's probably enough talking about cake. And I was gonna do some reading But Sarah's just gone home. It's, oh my goodness, is it 9 o'clock? I accidentally turned the phone off. Yeah, it's like 9 o'clock. So I think I'm going to watch some of the new series of Bridgerton and continue my latest craft project, which I'm doing to avoid doing the pile of crafts projects I'm supposed to be doing. I decided today to crochet my friend's cat, a little cat pod. So I'm going to do that and watch Bridgerton. Bye. Welcome to my office on my lunch break. I've read the final book. And I really liked it. So this was Boulder by Eva Baltasar, translated by Julia Sanches. And I was gonna say this is my favourite of the four, and now I'm not sure. I've had a lovely time with all four of these books, and this was another great one to finish on. So this is a short novella. It's just over 100 pages, I think. And I actually finished it a couple of days ago. I've just been like mulling. Because even though it is such a slim little book, it covered quite a lot of ground, both in terms of the kind of themes and emotional journey that the characters go on, but also literally like over time. I've read a lot of books recently that really stretch time, so like a writing in like granular detail about a very small and condensed amount of time, whereas this covered like a couple of decades. Or at least a decade, I think. A decade, I think. So we are following an unnamed narrator. She is the Boulder, the eponymous Boulder. And she, at the start of the book, is working as a cook on a ship, not like a cruise ship, like a freighter ship. So she's like a mess cook. And she kind of thinks she's got this life hacked. Like, she's worked out what she thinks happiness is, what she thinks a good life is, and that is basically just like not getting in anyone's way and just being chill and just living a little bit hand to mouth, and specifically not being rooted anywhere, not having ties, being able to come and go. And then she meets a woman called Samsa, and she's like falls like desperately in love with her. And you follow their relationship from sort of being a bit long distance, where so Boulder, this is a name that Samsa gives to our main character. So Boulder will at first is still working on the ships, and they're seeing each other sort of every few weeks. But then Samsa gets this fancy great job back in Iceland, which is where she's from. And so Boulder decides to go with her and settles down and sort of renounces this philosophy of living that she'd created for herself in order to follow the woman she loves. And then we jump ahead in time again, and they've been together for a few years. And then Samsa really, really wants a child. And Boulder really doesn't want a child. But she doesn't want to lose Samsa, so she sort of agrees that they can try and get pregnant. And that's kind of, the book is sort of about that. It follows their relationship, and I haven't like spoiled anything there. That is all. Yeah, that is all on the blurb. I was just joking. And I thought it was so interesting. I thought it was beautifully written. So let me read you a few little bits. It's really a story about like how we can accidentally start living lives that we're not supposed to be living, because we we really, really love the people that we love, and we want to be the person that fits into their life really well because we love them. And that's a really painful thing it's a really painful situation to be in. It's a really painful thing to read. But I thought it was done so well. And the book is it's written in like quite short vignettes. And I really loved the prose style. I think for some people it might be like a little too, possibly a little too, not even rich, but a little too detailed in the way she writes about things. But I absolutely loved it. Where is a bit that I wanted to read? So I'm going to read you a couple of bits that are sort of about her at the start and her philosophy of life, and then a bit from towards the end. So, it's what I came here looking for, true zero. I was tired of inventing resumes and having to pretend life had a structure, as though there was a metal rod inside me keeping me upright and steady. The destination always kills the journey, and if I had to reduce life to a story, it can only be a bad one. So I was just like, I love that idea that sort of Boulder, who she is at the start of the book, isn't even someone who would consider it worthwhile to write down a story of someone's life, or that the purpose of life was to have a single story, that they're sort of refuting this idea that there could be this grand arc of someone's life. And it's ironic then that actually she does end up having one. And what was the other bit from around here? I think I've discovered what happiness is. Whistling the moment you wake up, not getting in anyone's way, owing no explanations, and falling into bed at daybreak, body addled from exhaustion and mind free of every last trace of bitterness and dust. Everyone on board thinks I'm certifiable, that I'm the black sheep of an aristocratic family, that someone murdered my parents and siblings, and I'm here lying low with an anonymous crew so that I can plan out every detail of a slow, cold-blooded revenge. I let them believe it because they're friendly and because at the end of the day we're more like family than if we shared the same mother. We all incubate here in the boat's amniotic fluid. The boat loves and nurtures us. It invites us to take another look at ourselves. I let myself be strung along. Life develops without overwhelming me. It squeezes into every minute. It implodes. I hold it in my hands. I can give anything up because nothing is essential when you refuse to imprison life in a narrative. And so she very clearly sets her stall out at the beginning, and then we watch her take steps to completely disrupt and change her approach to life, and we're kind of unsure of like whether or not this is going to be the making of her, because that's quite an extreme sort of philosophy that she's got, really. But yeah, we don't know if like I'm like, are we going to watch this be dismantled brackets positive, or are we gonna watch this be dismantled brackets negative? And I'm not gonna tell you. And actually, even though it's a really amazing section, I'm not gonna read the section actually that I was going to read you, because it's like, it's not spoilery, but I think if you're interested in reading it, you're better off not knowing the direction that it takes and where the characters go. But I think it was really interesting because by refusing to have a narrative of her own life and being incredibly independent, it actually leaves her sort of wide open to have other lives imposed on top of hers. Because if she's refusing to give her life a narrative, then someone else can overlay the narrative of their life onto her or pull her into theirs, because she doesn't have one of her own. And I just thought it was really interesting. It was fascinating. It was really interesting to see a book dealing with a relationship between two women, a romantic relationship between two women where there is disagreement about whether or not children should be part of their future. I thought that was navigated really, really well. It made me achy at points, this book. It made me sad. And I just thought the writing was so, so beautiful. I can completely see why it was
nominated for the International Booker, because I think Julia Sanches, I can't speak to obviously the original Catalan that it was written in, but Julia Sanches has done a beautiful English translation of what I'm sure was an incredibly beautiful book in the original Catalan. But yeah, I love this, and I'm so excited because I know she's had a couple out since this came out. I wish this wasn't a library copy. I was trying to be good. And not buy the books, but I did think I was going to love this book, and I did love this book, and now I have to give it back. We're embracing the lack of permanence. Boulder would be thrilled. But yeah, so there we are. That's all four books. I will mull over whether or not I can find a unifying theme for them. I guess it always ends up being the same thing with these vlogs, isn't it? It's always something like stories that we construct about our lives. I think all four books are kind of concerned with that. They're concerned with actually really, really specifically, all four of them, very overtly concerned with, interested in how we construct stories about our own life. Obviously, Boulder, we've got that narrative, refusing to have a life, or not wanting to have a life that's got a clear narrative. Ali Smith is always interested in the stories that people are telling themselves about the times that they are living in and their place in them, and particularly I thought that was true in Companion Piece, and also that element of a sort of inverted choose your own adventure, which on reflection is kind of how that book feels to me. And then the Carson McCullers, we had Frankie, Jasmine, Frances reinventing herself on an almost daily basis, because she just sort of feels such an innate dissatisfaction with the opportunities that are open to her. And then in Letter to My Daughter, my Angelou is literally distilling lessons from her life and constructing them into these short little letters, sort of trying to draw out the things that she's learned by living the life that she has lived, and how she has lived it, and passing those lessons on. So there you go. That's how they all link, I guess. I hope you've enjoyed hanging out with me. It's been lovely for me to be back doing these videos. I really missed not having some impatient reading in April. It made me very sad. So I will be back with another one in June. June, gear yourselves up. We're about to get into this Euros thing, all right? It's probably most of what I'm going to be talking about for the next month, but I'm going to try and make it fun. Because the reading wasn't always very fun. But yeah, if you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a little thumbs up. That really helps, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't and you want to stick around for any more of these in the future. And see you later. Bye.